Clara Dawson had always been different from other girls in her Boston neighborhood. While many spent their days dreaming of fancy dresses, elegant dances, and the approval of wealthy suitors, Clara spent her time with books. She loved reading about wide-open spaces, endless skies, and brave women who made their own choices. She often sat by her small bedroom window, looking at the city streets below, imagining a life that was far bigger than the one she had. Her parents were good people but practical. They believed that a woman's future depended on marrying a man who could provide a stable life. Clara, however, wanted something more than just stability. She wanted to feel alive. She wanted to wake up in the morning and breathe air that smelled of grass and earth, not smoke from the busy factories. One cold morning in early spring, Clara's friend Nora brought her a folded newspaper. "You should see this," Nora whispered, placing it in Clara's hands like a secret treasure. On the back page was a section titled "Mail Order Brides Wanted." Clara's heart gave a strange little jump. The advertisement was short, written in bold letters. Young women of good character needed to marry men in the Western Territories. Travel provided. Honest men seek wives to build a good life together. The word stayed with her all day. That night, while her parents were talking in the kitchen, Clara read the ad again and again. She knew it wasn't what her family would want for her, but deep down, she also knew this might be her only chance to live the life she had always dreamed of. For weeks, she wrote and rewrote a letter, introducing herself to a man named Mr. Robert Hargrove, a ranch owner in Texas who had placed one of the ads. She wrote about her love for the countryside, her ability to work hard, and her wish to build a real partnership. She did not pretend to be soft and quiet like other women were expected to be. She was honest. When Robert's reply arrived, it was short and firm. He approved of her letter and was willing to pay for her train ticket. "If you are strong and willing to follow instructions," he wrote, "then I will give you a good home." Her parents were surprised when Clara told them about her decision. Her mother's hands shook as she set down a teacup. "Clara," she said softly, "are you sure you want to do this? You don't even know this man." "I know enough," Clara replied with a steady voice, "and I know I want more than this life." Her father sighed but saw the determination in her eyes. He had always known Clara's spirit couldn't be contained, so after many long talks and a few tears, they gave their blessing. The day Clara left Boston, the train station was crowded with families, workers, and travelers. She wore her best dress, a simple blue one with a small white lace collar. She carried a single brown leather suitcase with her name carefully written on a tag. As the steam from the train rose around her, she felt a mix of fear and excitement. This was it. She was leaving everything familiar behind. The train ride was long, stretching over days and nights. She passed towns she had never heard of, rivers that shimmered in the sunlight and fields that seemed to go on forever. She watched children wave at the train, farmers riding horses, and endless hills covered in wildflowers. It was a world so different from the city she had known. At night, when the other passengers were asleep, Clara whispered to herself, "I can do this." She repeated it like a promise. Finally, after what felt like forever, the train slowed as it reached a small station in Texas. The platform was dusty and warm, the air filled with the scent of horses and earth. A group of men stood waiting, their hats pulled low to block the sun. Among them was Robert Hargrove, the man she was supposed to marry. He was tall with a trimmed mustache and a serious expression. "Miss Dawson," he said when she stepped off the train. His voice was polite but cold. "Yes," Clara answered, lifting her chin. "Follow me," he said. "We'll get you settled." No kind smile. No warm greeting. Just instructions. They rode in a wagon to his ranch, passing stretches of dry land, fences, and cattle. Clara sat straight, holding her hat in her lap, trying to take everything in. The ranch itself was large and well kept, with a big wooden house, barns, and cowhands moving about with purpose. It was beautiful in its own rough way, but from the very first evening, Clara felt the tension. Robert gave her a list of rules: when she should cook, how she should dress, when she should speak, and when she should stay silent. A wife must not question her husband, he told her after dinner, his tone firm as if it were an absolute truth. Clara listened politely, but inside something stirred. She had not traveled halfway across the country to become someone's shadow. She had dreams of building a life together, not of following orders like a servant. In the days that followed, Robert grew impatient. Clara asked questions about the ranch, suggested ways to improve the kitchen garden, and refused to wear the plain dull dresses he had laid out for her. She wore her blue dress instead, the same one she had arrived in, and she walked with her head high. Some of the ranch hands whispered among themselves, surprised by the courage of this young woman from Boston. One of them, a quiet cowboy named Luke Turner, noticed her more than the others. He worked with the horses and rarely spoke, but every time Clara passed by he found himself watching her, not because she was simply pretty, though she was, but because she carried herself with a kind of quiet strength he had never seen before. Robert, however, did not see strength. He saw disobedience. He grew colder each day. One morning, as the sun rose over the dusty fields, Clara suggested she could help keep the books for the ranch. She had learned mathematics from her father, who had run a small business in Boston. "I could make the work easier for you," she said carefully, hoping to be useful. Robert's jaw tightened. "I didn't bring you here to run things," he said sharply. "I brought you here to be a wife, to do as I say." Clara felt the sting of those words, but she didn't lower her head. "A marriage isn't a cage," she said quietly, but firmly. That was the moment Robert decided she wasn't the bride he wanted. 2 days later, as Clara was sitting on the porch watching the horses in the distance, Robert came out with a stiff look on his face. "Pack your things," he said. "I'm sending you back. I need a woman who listens." Clara felt a wave of shock wash over her. She had left everything behind, traveled so far, and now she was being returned like a package that didn't fit, but she refused to cry. Slowly, with steady hands, she packed her few belongings into the same brown suitcase she had brought from Boston. When the wagon came to take her back to the train station, some of the ranch hands stood silently nearby. They had come to respect her spirit in those short days. Among them was Luke. He leaned against the fence, hat tilted low, but his eyes followed her. As the wagon rolled away, Clara sat tall, her hands folded in her lap. Her heart hurt, but her spirit was unbroken. She told herself again, "I can do this." At the train depot, the afternoon sun cast a warm glow over the dusty platform. Clara sat on a wooden bench with her suitcase by her feet, trying to decide what to do next. She could return to Boston, but the thought made her chest tighten. She had tasted freedom even if it came with heartbreak, and that was when Luke Turner approached. He walked slowly, unsure if he should speak. Clara noticed his shadow before she looked up. He took off his hat, holding it in his hands, a gesture of quiet respect. "I saw what happened," he said softly. His voice was warm, nothing like Robert's cold tone. "You didn't deserve that." Clara looked at him carefully. His clothes were dusty, his hands rough from work, but his eyes were kind. "I'll be fine," she replied, though her voice trembled just a little. "I reckon you will," Luke said with a faint smile. "You've got fire in you. Most folks here are scared of that. I'm not." For the first time in days, Clara felt something ease inside her. Not because someone was saving her, but because someone saw her. Truly saw her. She didn't know what the future would hold, but as she sat there on that bench with the sun dipping lower and a quiet cowboy standing nearby, she felt a spark of hope return. She had been sent back, yes, but her story wasn't over. It was only just beginning. Clara sat at the train station for what felt like hours, though only a short time had passed. The sun was dipping low, painting the wooden platform in golden light. The warm wind brushed against her face, carrying the smell of horses, hay, and dust. People moved in and out of the station, travelers coming and going, but she sat still with her suitcase at her feet, not sure where her journey would lead next. She thought about Boston. She pictured the narrow streets, the smell of smoke, the sound of her mother's soft humming in the kitchen. It was familiar, yes, but the idea of returning there after everything she had experienced made her heart sink. She had crossed the country for a new beginning. How could she go back now and pretend nothing had changed inside her? She sighed softly and ran her hand over the worn leather of her suitcase. She didn't have many options, but she still had her pride. She wasn't going to let one rejection decide the rest of her life. Just as she was lost in her thoughts, she heard footsteps approaching the bench. She looked up to see Luke Turner standing there again. He held his hat in his hands, just like before, his posture calm and respectful. His brown hair was a little messy from the wind, and there was a kindness in his eyes that made her feel unexpectedly safe. "Still here?" he asked gently, his voice soft but steady. Clara gave a small, tired smile. For now, I suppose the train will take me back soon enough. Luke shifted slightly, kicking a small stone with his boot. Do you want to go back? He asked after a moment. She looked at him carefully, searching for any hint of pity in his expression. There was none. Only honest curiosity. No, she answered finally, her voice quiet but firm. I don't. Luke nodded as if he had expected that. Good, he said. Because I don't think your story's meant to end like that. Something in his words made her chest tighten. No one had ever spoken to her like that before, as if her future was something big, not something small and settled. I don't know what I'll do, she admitted. Well, he said slowly, you could stay here a while. There's work in town. Good people who'd lend a hand and… He hesitated for a second, then looked at her more directly. I've got a small place. A ranch not near as big as Robert's, but it's honest work. I could use help. Someone who's not afraid of a little dust. Clara tilted her head. Are you offering me a job? Luke's mouth curved into a small grin. I guess I am. You're strong. And stubborn. Clara almost laughed, the first real laugh she'd had in days. She thought about it for a long moment. She could board that train and return to Boston, to the same quiet life she had always known. Or she could take a chance on something new, again. Her heart whispered the answer before her mind could. I'll stay, she said softly, for now. Luke nodded once as if that was exactly what he'd hoped she'd say. He picked up her suitcase and led her down the dusty road. The sun had nearly set, and the sky was painted with streaks of pink and gold. As they walked, Clara felt something shift inside her, something light and warm, like hope quietly growing again. Luke's ranch was small compared to Robert's, but it had a kind of charm that made Clara smile the moment she saw it. The wooden house stood at the top of a small hill, with a porch that looked out over fields of waving grass. There were a few horses in the corral and a small barn. It wasn't grand, but it felt real. Luke showed her around with quiet pride. It's not much, he said, but it's home. I built a lot of it myself. Every board has a story. Clara listened carefully, not just to his words, but to the way he spoke. There was no need to impress, no need to control. He simply shared. The next morning, Clara began helping around the ranch. She cooked breakfast while Luke worked with the horses, and in the afternoon she joined him outside. She didn't just stay in the house like a guest. She learned. She learned how to feed the animals, how to fix fences, and how to saddle a horse properly. Luke was patient. He never raised his voice, never gave orders. He explained things with a kind tone and listened when she had ideas of her own. One afternoon she suggested planting vegetables near the porch to make meals easier. Luke smiled. That's a good idea, he said. Let's do it. That small moment meant a lot to her. In Boston, people often ignored her ideas. At Robert's ranch, they had dismissed her entirely. But here, her thoughts mattered. Day by day, their friendship grew. Luke admired her courage and her unwillingness to give up. Clara admired his quiet strength, the kind that didn't need to shout to be heard. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat on the porch together. The air was warm, the sky filled with stars. Clara leaned back in her chair and sighed with quiet contentment. I never imagined my life would look like this, she said softly. Luke looked at her from the corner of his eye. Do you like it? She nodded. I do. Good, he replied with a gentle smile. Because it suits you. His words made her cheeks warm, but she didn't look away. She felt seen. Not as a runaway bride, not as a problem to be solved, but as herself. Of course, not everyone in town was kind at first. Some people whispered about her, the mail-order bride who had been sent back. But Clara didn't let their words sink into her heart. She kept working, kept smiling, kept showing everyone she was more than what they thought. One day, when she went to the general store in town, she heard two women talking behind her back. She didn't even last a week with Robert, one of them whispered. She's too proud for her own. Good, the other replied. Clara turned around and gave them a calm, steady look. Or maybe, she said softly, I just know my worth. She didn't shout. She didn't argue. She simply walked out with her head high, and from that day forward, those whispers began to fade. As the weeks passed, Clara and Luke became partners in every sense. They worked side by side, laughed at small things, and shared quiet meals on the porch. Luke taught her how to ride horses with confidence, and she taught him how to keep accounts more neatly. Together, they made the little ranch thrive. One afternoon, a storm passed over the fields, leaving behind fresh air and the scent of rain. Clara stood at the window watching the clouds roll away. Luke came up behind her, not too close, just enough that she could feel his presence. "You've made this place better," he said simply. She turned to look at him, surprised. "I just helped a little." He shook his head. "No, you brought something I didn't even know was missing." Their eyes met in the soft light of the evening, and for a moment the world outside grew quiet. Neither of them needed big words. They both felt it, something gentle, strong, and real growing between them. Months passed like this, each day building a new piece of their shared story. Luke never rushed her, never demanded anything from her. Their bond grew naturally, like wildflowers spreading across a field. When spring came again, the ranch was full of life. The garden Clara had planted was growing well. The horses were healthy. The small house felt warm and lived in. One evening, as the sky turned to soft gold, Luke stood on the porch holding a small wooden box. He walked toward Clara, who was sitting on the steps, enjoying the quiet evening breeze. "I made something," he said, handing her the box. Inside was a simple silver ring with a small, clear stone. It wasn't fancy, but it shone in the fading light. "I don't want you to ever feel like you belong to someone," Luke said gently. "But if you'd want to share this life with me, as my partner, not my property, I'd be the luckiest man alive." Clara's heart swelled. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't an expectation. It was a choice, hers. She closed the box softly and looked up at him, her eyes shining with emotion. "Yes," she said, her voice steady and full of warmth. "Yes, I'll stay." Luke smiled, and a quiet, joyful smile, and slipped the ring onto her finger. They didn't need a grand ceremony or fancy words. They had each other, and that was enough. In the years that followed, their little ranch grew into something beautiful. They worked hard, side by side, building a life filled with laughter, honesty, and respect. People in town began to see them differently, too. They were no longer whispering about the mail-order bride who was sent back. Now they spoke about the strong woman who built a good life from the ground up, and the cowboy who loved her not for who he wanted her to be, but for who she truly was. Clara often stood on the porch at sunset, the same way she had when she first arrived. But now she wasn't alone. Luke would stand beside her, their hands brushing together as they watched the sky. She had left Boston with uncertainty, but she had found something more precious than she ever expected. Freedom, respect, and love that grew gently, like roots beneath the soil. She had been sent back once, but what seemed like an ending had only been the beginning of a far greater story.